Good morning. If you are here for the Legislative and Human Resource Committee meeting, you are in the right place. So we'll call the meeting to order. First item on our agenda is public comment. If you have anything you would like to address the committee on, please limit your time to no more than 3 minutes.
How you doing, everybody? My name is DeAndre Jones. I prefer D Jones because that's what they call me in the hood. I said 967 Tamarack Avenue, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49504. I'm here to speak to you guys. I just did a TV interview for Fox 17. They got the the career path forward, and I was one of the people that they interviewed yesterday. So I got to talk about esports and my experience of bringing a gun to school and how I changed my whole life around. And I really didn't get to get my 2 minutes that I should have got at the last commission, but I won an International Business Award for my esports competition for the work that I put in here locally. I went from city to city, probably some of you guys, areas that you legislate in, and I got resources from all across Kent County to put something together, and it got international, global attention. And I ended up winning the International Business Award. It's going to be people from like Nike and all of these big companies there, and they'll see me end up getting this award. So I'm excited. I'm excited to put Kent County on and put us in a positive light in the city of GR and the state as a whole. I'm just really honored to even be able to provide access and opportunity to esports and gaming and give back to the community. Like, it's really an honor to do that. And I appreciate every single patron and every single person that came and supported me and showed me love, because I genuinely put everything that I had into this esports competition. I spent my gas. At times, I didn't even know if the sponsorships and the things were going to come in. Commissioner Ponstein, thank you for all of the love and just you just always being a positive person. Like, you always come to me, you always say things, and you always have positive things to say, and I just really appreciate you. It's not a lot of genuine people like you, especially a white man. You're a white man, and you're telling me positive things as a young African American, and I've always experienced awkwardness with politicians, but I can always just tell that you come to me as a human being, and that's what politics should be. Regardless of party, you should always do what's best for human beings and not what's always best for party. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the party, it's about the human beings that you ran to serve, that you put your time, your sweat, equity, and probably tears. You know, it's a lot of pain that comes with politics, and people don't know that. And I understand it because I worked in politics, and I understand how these policies and these laws affect people every day, our every day, regardless if it's law enforcement. We're going to be playing Call of Duty at the National Guard base at August 12th, so it's going to be fun. I'm going to be able to get some veteran services, and I'm going to be able to give back to the veterans and surround them with good services, and I can't wait to do that. And I would love to do that for all of the departments. I would love to break barriers. I would love to be able to just do cool, innovative things and make sure that our county is a better, equitable, safe, and just place for everybody. I really appreciate being able to speak to you guys and you guys listen to me, and Commissioner Ponstein, from genuinely with everything I got. Thank you for everything.
DeAndre, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? Seeing no one, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve last meeting's minutes? Motion by Teal, support by LeGrand. Any comments, questions, or changes? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Last meeting minutes have been approved. So we have Steve Carey with us today, or this morning, with Potomac Strategic Development. So, Steve, if you can hear us, and go ahead and we'll get started.
I can hear you. I want to make sure Charlie can be heard too. Can you give me a thumbs up, Charlie? Say something to the...
Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Very good. Okay. Can you hear him too? Very good. Good morning, everybody. We've got a lot to cover. It's a pleasure joining you today. I know all of the eyes and concerns are around the debt ceiling, so let me address that, and we can talk about more Kent County specific issues. Yesterday, the president and the speaker met to hammer out a deal on the debt ceiling. They are still far apart. Late last week, I thought that they were much closer, but over the weekend, there were new demands that were placed by the House Republicans into the deal, a number of them including cutting funding for the FBI, other demands, including work requirements for various social program funding, et cetera. I will say, and I will provide you with a more detailed report on where things stand today, but I will tell you that I think at the end of the day, they will get a deal. It's unfortunate that it's gotten to this point, but as I've worked for you over the past few years, you've seen that Congress finally gets these deals done at the last minute. The concern about this is that last time we were this close was in 2011, and it did rock the markets a bit, and it downgraded our credit rating to the extent that it increased the cost of borrowing, not just for personal borrowing, but also federal borrowing. As you all know, we are in a debt, which is what we're addressing, and it costs money to pay that interest on the debt. So if our credit rating decreases, that's more money that goes to the payment of that debt and less money for discretionary spending that we need for emergency services, road construction, security, et cetera. So but again, it's our expectation that they will cut a deal. The one other issue is that the Speaker has committed to his colleagues in the House that they would have 72 hours to review any final deal. That would require, in order for Congress to be able to leave for the Memorial Day recess, they would have to have something by tomorrow afternoon. I don't think that happens, so that will spill over into the Memorial Day recess. I know that there are not many hearts broken for members of Congress to have to stay to finish their job, but I just wanted to tell you that there's that dynamic. They end up getting a lot accomplished when their backs are against the wall and there are deadlines. Charlie, anything that I've missed on this before we move on to Kent County specific?
Yeah.
And then, of course, answering any questions.
Just wanted to add, as Steve said, there's a 72-hour waiting period. They also need to get legislative text finished. They also have to get a Congressional Budget Office score completed. So I guess the best case scenario is they get it to an agreement this weekend or early next week, and then the Senate has to act on it as well. And of course, Senate Majority Leader Schumer said he would expedite any consideration on that. So it still remains to be seen what will happen next. It may be necessary for the House to pass a short-term extension if they get a deal. And then again, maybe the Treasury needs to implement a very brief patch, just to avoid that dreaded default, which would have a catastrophic effect. So that's where we are right now. I know that the negotiations were deemed, their progress was made, but they fell short of saying that they were productive. But at least they're talking, and at least they're being respectful at this point.
Does anybody have any question about that?
Well, Steve, I was wondering if we're going to lock them into Washington, why can't we lock them out? That might be the better solution for all of us.
Well, Chairman, I would just say that that you've stolen my joke. When they are in recess, I report to folks, I will say the country is safe. They're yours now. So, to your point. Any other question about the substance of this?
Do we have any comments or questions? Commissioner Diaz.
I'm sorry?
Yes, Commissioner Diaz.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Carey, thank you for that first analysis on the debt ceiling. I just have one quick question. I was in middle school the last time that the debt ceiling was breached, and it's probably too much to hope for, but is there any discussions about getting rid of the debt ceiling or raising the debt ceiling to such a high number that we wouldn't have to go through this crisis every couple of years?
There's a provision in the Constitution. It's Article 14 that states that all debt and so forth, the creditworthiness of the United States is sacrosanct, in that we would never default. And there's a a discussion going, certainly in the White House, but also in the DC policy arenas, that the president would be able to waive that. And the only problem with that, there's a couple problems, but the most notable problem with that is that there could be a court case that goes to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would have to determine whether or not that's valid. In which case, the time between when the Treasury realizes it cannot pay all of the bills to the time that the Supreme Court makes its decision, we don't know how that plays out. And then if the Supreme Court determines that the president doesn't have that power, then what? And then it really would put the House Republicans in much better control, because there's not that leverage point. I will say, Commissioner, that the debt is a very serious issue, but the debt ceiling legislation, in my humble opinion, 30 years working budget issues on appropriations and so forth, that's not the best place to deal with this. They should deal with spending on appropriations bills, the annual appropriations bills, and the various mandatory spending measures. So, but unfortunately, as of late, Congress has not had the ability to sit down at the table and have serious discussions like that. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. I think it's just unfortunate how often the games are played in D.C.
And it's getting worse, Commissioner.
Yes, it is, and that's quite unfortunate. But who knows? Maybe we'll have some changes in the near future. Thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein, please.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, the one thing I'm always just amazed at is the word catastrophic, end of the world, because we're dealing with a debt. And what no one realizes ever is that if something's going to happen, let's just say we had a debt ceiling crisis and the national debt was 3 or 4 trillion. It would be meaningless. But our debt isn't 3 or 4 trillion, it's 32 trillion. And I think that's got to get their focus. We always say, well, we got to take care of this problem in appropriations. All they do in appropriations is spend more money, which adds to the debt, which leads to another debt ceiling. Is there any realistic hope that we're going to rein in spending?
Great question, Commissioner. A couple different responses here. That you're right. Appropriations, because annual appropriations deals with discretionary spending, there's not a heck of a lot there. It's not discretionary spending that is hurting us. Actually, it's discretionary spending that allows us to provide for the defense needs to defend against aggression from, say, China or Iran, or what's going on in Ukraine. It's providing us with the medicines that we need for the next COVID, et cetera. It's education programs. What's really putting us over the top is the mandatory spending. We saw what happened in France when the president tried to add just a couple of years to the retirement program in order to retirement for them to preserve their program, and the riots occurred. But that's what's needed. If you were to extend just by a couple of years Social Security, we wouldn't be in the Social Security crisis in the next few years that we currently face. But those are the tough decisions, because then you have, say, AARP up against the budget hawks. I get a kind of a kick out of the fact that a member would cut discretionary spending and pick a subcommittee, whether it's transportation, housing, urban development, or defense, or labor, health, human services, et cetera. And it's a drop in the bucket. It's not even a penny. I do agree that maybe you can slow the growth of discretionary spending, which, by the way, the Republicans are proposing, but they're proposing a discretionary spending cap at 22 levels for fiscal year 24, which essentially is about an 8.6% cut, which is not very workable for people. I'm sure for the county that would be devastating. I don't know where you would find 9% to cut, but slowing the growth of spending would be a big help. But that's needed in mandatory spending. But again, the adults in the room, well, there aren't any adults in the room lately. Does that make sense, Commissioner? Or again, was that a word salad?
I don't like the word salad either, but no, it was a flyover, good overview of it. This is a issue that's been going on spending, and I watched 60 Minutes on how these defense contractors are overbilling the taxpayers by 10, 20-fold, and there's so much wrong. Because there's such a glut in DC, it's become this just gigantic monster that we've got to start reining in on all levels.
And that's a great point too. The last time they made a real effort to audit the Pentagon and that kind of spending and the redundancy and the increases and so forth, it's been about 10 years. And I remember Congressman Tim Griffin from Arkansas made an effort, but then he ended up running for a lieutenant governor. And since he's left, there's not been any real effort to rein in that spending. The other challenge at the Pentagon is that it takes so long to turn from one program to the next. You look at China, for example, and they are able to ramp up a program within a year or two. It takes probably 6 to 10 years for the Department of Defense to identify a need or a shortcoming and address it, because there are so many checks and balances and commissions and so forth that they cannot turn quickly enough. So your point is well taken, and it's a great observation.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and if you can get through the auditing of the Defense Department, I will work on auditing the Fed.
Well, don't thank me. I'm thanking you for being able to work for you, and it's a pleasure. You're my home county, and I love that I work for you. So, and never hesitate to reach out to me. It doesn't have to be these formal calls. I am here for you any day.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no adults in the room makes perfect sense. So it says it makes sense, and yes, that made perfect sense when you said that. So I appreciate you summing it up that way.
Thank you.
Any other
Shall we move on?
Yes, any other questions?
Oh, please.
All right, yes.
Okay, moving on just to some more immediate issues that affects the county directly. Well, not the debt ceiling would affect everybody, but moving on to appropriations. We are at I would say, part 2, if you will, of say 5 steps in the appropriations process. We have submitted our requests. I will applaud my direct reports and your team, Lori and Josh. They have done a great job submitting the projects to the House and Senate members of our delegation. And where this process stands is that because of the debt ceiling, a few things are on hold, appropriations in particular. They had expected to move defense first, but they realized that defense is probably going to have to wait to negotiate with the members of the Labor, Health, Human Services, Education Appropriation Subcommittee members. So you've got defense, and then you've got the social spending programs, and they usually negotiate the spending on those fronts. But there has been a delay on the fiscal year 24 markups because of the debt ceiling, because they don't have a budget. We expect that they will mark up most, if not all, the House, most, if not all, the House appropriations bills through June. It's the Senate's expectation, too, that they would do the same. Now, I don't know if that's actually going to happen. Again, since I've been working for you, you've heard me say this before, that it's the House or the Senate's expectation that they would move on these fiscal year bills, but they end up, because of bandwidth and the calendar and just the challenges, they end up marking everything up right before October. And remember, October 1 is the beginning of the fiscal year, or spilling it over into that October, December 31st timeframe. And in some cases, recall 2 years ago, these bills weren't passed until into the next calendar year, or 4 or 5 months into that fiscal year. I could see something like that happening. So what does that mean for our projects? That means that if we are able to push our projects over the finish line and accepted by the committee, that we would not see those bills signed into law until as late as next March. We hope that they would be signed by at least December. There's that magic, hey, we want to leave town and have a clean slate before we return kind of sentiment. And so that's been the case in many instances. Charlie, what am I missing on that one?
I think you've covered it all, Steve. I just as I would say, there is a chance that there might be an end of the year fight over these appropriations bills, and but I don't have anything else to add.
Very good. So again, the more specific issues to you, and congratulations for the Grand River Greenway Trail, $7 million, and then also the Behavioral Health Crisis Stabilization Unit services were requested by the delegation. We're going to press for those. And again, congratulations and thank you for their efforts, Lori and Josh, for staying in touch with the delegation. Any questions on that?
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thanks, Steve. Just one thing you touched on briefly. The other thing that always seems to be a problem in Washington, D.C. is the Farm Bill. And I know Senator Stabenow's in her final term. That's always been something that she's worked hard on behalf of agriculture in this country. Why is it such a problem when it comes to that? You know, I know the Republicans prefer the direct aid directly to the farmers. The Democrats want to protect the food assistance programs that are normally tied in there. Where is this going to end up, or is it always going to be, it's always one of the last things that gets approved and worked on? What is the outlook for Senator Stabenow on getting this through? And, you know, I know in Michigan, I mean, we're number 2 in crop diversity in the country and closing in quickly on number 1. So, I mean, ag is a big thing in this country.
Another great question, Commissioner, and I guess we could be a little philosophical about it, but inject some of the history of success here too. You know, the Department of Agriculture was initially by President Lincoln an effort to help the farmers and so forth, but it has turned into it's largely social programs there. And I'm not judging it; it's just how it is. But you know, one of the provisions that the House Republicans are pushing for in the debt ceiling is a work requirement for SNAP programs. So so the Farm Bill has become, you know, a very contentious bill. That said, I am optimistic that Chairwoman Stabenow, Senator Stabenow, will end up succeeding. I happen to know her counterpart on the House side. His name is G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, a very amiable, in the spirit of the old-fashioned, you know, Gerald Ford way of doing things, he is open to a number of, I guess, some flexibility in addressing these legislative hurdles. The challenge there is, again, it's going to be the Republican leadership and whether or not he can actually be the chair and negotiate the way he should be able to, or if this is going to be a top-down process. But at the end of the day, I think Debbie Stabenow has her success, and a lot of that will be because of the leadership of G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. Charlie also knows GT. Charlie, do you have anything to add on the Farm Bill or
Oh, sure.
assessment? And if you think I'm wrong, expose me to the commissioners. I want them to have a candid view of what's going on in DC.
Yeah, and I would say that the Farm Bill is really on the top of the things that we're looking out for. There's so much involved here, as Steve said. There are many reforms to the SNAP program that impact children and families. There's everything from crop insurance coverage to technical assistance for farmers and agriculture producers. But there is also a lot in there that impacts grant programs that are used for counties like Kent County in developing in community development strategies, economic growth, also education, healthcare, and public safety benefits for both rural and urban areas. So these are some of the things we're looking at very closely. I would also add that rural infrastructure is also involved in there. I could go on, and also should mention conservation programs, because I know there's a lot of conservation partnerships that are important to Kent County, conservation stewardship programs, and so forth. So this is every 5 years they come along with the Farm Bill, and we hope that it's fully funded, and something that we will be monitoring along with some other issues that we've listed on this screen.
All right, any other comments or questions?
Any other questions?
All right, just a few, I got a couple things. One, maybe not more questions, just maybe more information. So we do have employees that are here at Kent County that are tied to federal funding. If the government did shut down, those employees, that money goes to the state of Michigan, and then we get those in roughly quarterly payments. So if those monies we didn't receive those, then we would start sending layoff notices, and those folks could potentially lose their jobs until funding was completed. Administrator Vanderburg, if you have anything else to add, or if I hit that quite good.
Thankfully, that's something we haven't had to do very often, and there are times when we've sent out letters and the money has come. So but that would be very extreme. We're not anticipating that's going to happen, but there would be a fallout. I mean, county government is not funded to cover the state and the feds if they don't make their payments.
And then Commissioner Administrator Vanderburg was looking at some information too. The last time we had a balance and zero budget was 1835. Andrew Jackson, we roughly had a debt of 58 million. That would be about $1.4 billion today that he had at zero. So almost 200 years ago, just to let you know. Any other comments? 200 years. All right.
Yeah, I hate looking back at when I first started on Capitol Hill and how we passed our bills by October 1. It was a breeze. Yeah, looking back is so frustrating.
Right.
I hear you though, Commissioner.
Yep, and just again, keep on advocating. Obviously, we got the design for the airport tower at the Ford Airport. Obviously, that's just one step. That's vital to the success of Kent County. The airport's roughly a $3 billion, can contribute about $3 billion a year to our West Michigan economy. That goal is $10 billion by 2030, and that airport tower removal and new one being built is vital to that success and that growth for Kent County and West Michigan.
Thank you for that. And we do work with Tory closely on infrastructure. We're also working with him on a water issue in Cascade. And I've been keeping my direct reports in Kent County informed on that. So we did get a funding approval through Congressman Meyer in the Water Resources Development Act, and that was just an authorization. We still have to get it funded. I've got to talk to the Detroit Core about that, but yes, we are, per your direction, we are working with the airport.
Great. Thank you. Anything else, Steve or Charlie?
I would love to see more of you here in DC. I think that as the competition for that federal funding becomes more intense, perhaps you could consider trips to DC. We could set up meetings with key lawmakers, but also key agency officials. I know that other counties have done this in the past. No pressure, but I'm just throwing it out there. I know that you're busy as it is, but if you were to consider that, whether it's this year or next, we would love to put together a fly-in, and I think it would yield results over time.
All right. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, Steve and Charlie, thank you so much for showing up here this morning and giving us this presentation.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. Enjoy your week. All right, Sheriff's Office, Performance Measurement Review, Corrections, the Sheriff and Lindsay.
All right, so good morning. I'm just going to reintroduce myself. My name is Lindsay Cole. I am a Chief Deputy at the Sheriff's Office, and I get the pleasure of doing this presentation this morning because it is the Corrections Performance Measure Review, and I have spent the last 20 years of my career in corrections in some capacity. So I am going to skim over a few of the things that the sheriff touched on in her presentation a couple of weeks back, so it's going to be a little bit of a review for you guys. If you could save any questions you have till the end, just like she asked too, because I do have a lot of information to get through, and nobody told me that I have to stick to 10 to 15 minutes, so I have no promises this time. But the sheriff will be around too in case a question comes up that I can't answer at the end. So I am going to start off here with values, vision, and mission. So values is really the initial foundation that our vision and mission are built off of. So it's a team of professionals who serve with integrity, compassion, and empathy to deliver our services. So basically, treating people with dignity and respect allows us to deliver services in the most effective and efficient ways. Vision, not only treating our community with respect, but being guardians of our community. So serving through vigilance, excellence, innovation, empowerment, and really leveraging our resources to proactively in a way that allows us to engage both the community and our staff to make changes or address any gaps that we have. And then lastly, our mission, to preserve, protect the safety and security of the community in a fair, impartial, and humane way to those entrusted in our care. So those entrusted in our care is really quite a circle, right? So it could be somebody at the end of a 911 call, or in this case, it could be somebody housed in our correctional facility. So it's really that full circle cycle of community care that we're talking about. I'm going to touch on our priorities now, and like the sheriff mentioned in her presentation, there's a nexus between the sheriff's office priorities and the county's priorities. You're going to see it especially in terms of caring for the community, the staff, service delivery, and management of our resources. So first and foremost for the sheriff's office, it's going to be that public safety, the lens in which we view all of our goals for obvious reasons. Second is going to be community engagement, right? Like understanding the community in order to know how to best serve our community. Third is providing effective, efficient, and fiscally responsible services. We're all working on a limited budget in law enforcement or the sheriff's office in general. We're expected to provide transparency. We have a higher demand than ever to provide superior care and services to the community, and with that, it requires a lot of resources to do so. It's that constant evaluation. And then resource and infrastructure sustainability. So this one sounds a lot like buildings and structures, but it's also our staff, most importantly, our staff. So we're seeing unprecedented changes in hiring and retention and corrections. In 2018, we had a 4% turnover rate in our staff. In 2022, we had an 11% turnover rate in our staff. So it's important for us to continue to pour into the staff, to develop and maintain our staff in order to accomplish our mission, our goals, and all of our priorities that are associated. I'm going to move into our goals now. Not every goal here has a performance measure attached. So you're going to get a lot of information in between, so bear with me. You'll recognize when there's a performance measure that comes up, though. So our public safety goal. Continued enhancement of the safety and security of the correctional facility. So typically, again, you're going to think in terms of infrastructure here, but this is also staff. I'm going to list off a few of the projects that we've had going on that's going to speak to this goal. So you've heard us talk a lot about the cell door project. Basically, when the 92 building was constructed, we had a much higher minimum level population. We've moved, the population over time has gradually transitioned into a medium custody or higher level population. So with the increased risk of the inmate, we've also seen an increase in aggressiveness in the inmates. So with that, we've seen a lot of the cell doors that started to be kicked open. And with that, it's what kind of kicked off or initiated that request for the cell door replacements, which we're currently working through right now. So those are expected to be completed end of next year sometime. Another project that we've got going on related to the door project is the door controls. So it's an upgrade in the electrical component that actually secures or opens the doors. So making sure those doors are not only the right custody level door, but also making sure we have the correct electrical components associated with those doors. Adding key tracking and card swipe systems. So anytime you can eliminate the use of keys in a correctional facility, obviously that minimizes risk. The card swipe system also accomplishes that. With the card swipe system, there's also going to be an interface with our cameras that allows for us to quickly identify who's going through doors based on that card swipe system. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the staffing study because I mentioned that this goal also pertains to staff. Higher custody inmates require higher levels of supervision. So higher levels of supervision basically mean that we have to evaluate how we're appropriating staff to that. I'm going to touch on a couple of statistics that are going to play into the performance measures that are going to come up next. So in 2018, we booked around 22,000 inmates. In 2022, we booked 14,500 inmates. However, our daily population has maintained around 1,000 throughout those handful of years. Our average length of stay went from 11 days to 14 and a half days in those years. And 75% of our population has become medium custody or higher. Medium custody or higher basically means that they've had 3 or more felony convictions in the last 5 years. They have a serious assaultive felony. They have significant behavioral issues in the facility, and a handful of other things, but those are kind of the top ones just to throw out there. But what that speaks to is the increase in our custody level in the population over those handful of years too. So our first performance measure is maintaining a major rule violation occurrence rate of less than 2 per 1,000 jail bed days. And you can see from the graph that we've seen a steady increase in that over time. And I pulled the first quarter for 2023 and we're hovering around 3. So again, it speaks to that gradual incline in that rate. And what we kind of attribute that back to is seeing more inmates in custody with serious assaultive charges, which also has an impact on our major rule violations. So as we see custody level rise, we see aggressiveness and behavior rise too, which accounts for these increased rule violations. In the first 6 months of this year alone, we've already had 3 assaults on staff, which is high for us. Community engagement, enhancing inmate programming. So we currently have 14 programs operating within the jail. They provide life skills, education, employment readiness, and a lot more, honestly. Those are just to name a few, but we do have a lot of programs in the facility right now that connect to our community partners. So post-release, they can continue that care once they're out. Speaking into our mental health and addiction treatment partners. So up till a year ago, we were grant funded for the MyRep and OTE, which were our MAT therapy groups that were functioning within the facility. We have maintained that through Network 180, so we continue that partnership with them, but we also partner with the Red Project, the health department, and a number of other entities as well. You guys will, at some point in the near future, hear us talk about the opioid settlement funds. The jail will have a proposal coming where we are requesting an expansion of those services. So currently, with the number of staff we have providing those services in the jail, we're not seeing people as quickly or addressing their needs as quickly as we'd like, and we're also not providing as much therapy as we'd like to do. So an increase in those funding sources will help us accomplish that. Optimizing departmental recruiting programs to promote diversity. The sheriff touched on this in her presentation as well. Our community represents many nations. Therefore, it's important for us to have staff that are able to identify with our community. It helps us provide and understand any gaps and meet all of the needs necessary, regardless of what division you're in the sheriff's office. Providing effective and efficient, fiscally responsible services. So the first bullet here speaks to dashboards. The jail is rich in data. So the jail management system that we had previously, and then the one that just currently got implemented in April here, has significant capabilities to data collection. We have many entities that already mine data. One dashboard we already have on Access Kent, if you're not aware, speaks to our average daily population statistics. In the future, we'll have abilities to have both internal-facing and external-facing dashboards through our jail management system called EIS, which will help us evaluate all of those daily operations and make sure that we're meeting all those thresholds. Staff deployment to reduce response times and overtimes, overtime, excuse me. So overtime is going to be kind of the focus of this bullet here for corrections. So overtime, we've had a lot of changes in the correctional facility. We've been in an ongoing evaluation state as we've continued to see overtime rates climb in the jail. There's many reasons for that, and you don't want me to take the time to go into them all, but we've had a lot of legislative changes. We've had a lot of operational changes since COVID, many of which did improve our efficiencies, but didn't eliminate the number of staff it takes to accomplish those things. So we're still in a constant evaluation process to make sure that we're fulfilling the operations that we have to do, guaranteeing break time, which we struggled to do, and then fulfilling the mandated positions that we have to fulfill. Resource and infrastructure sustainability. So continued emphasis on the professional development of staff. So these are big ones for us right now, right? As we've talked about all the staffing concerns that we've had. We really have to ensure that staff have meaningful training opportunities, paths to build skills. We have limited specialized positions, limited room for advancement. So we really have to find ways to personally grow and develop our staff in meaningful ways in order for them to want to stay employed with us, right? So that kind of speaks into the second bullet of mental and physical health as a priority. Obviously, mentally and physically empowered staff are better employees. They're more efficient, they feel more fulfilled, they're more productive, and having that work-life balance is what we all kind of strive for. An emphasis in de-escalation. The sheriff talked about this quite a bit in the last one too. So having that heavy emphasis on critical thinking, so being able to put our staff in those real-life situations with a variety of situations, a variety of variables, in order to prepare them for potential circumstances that they might encounter, in order for us to have better outcomes for when the staff are actually put into those positions ultimately. And I'm going to touch on this one a little bit more at the end too. But master plan for expansion and renovations of our facility to meet future needs. So last year, the jail had a feasibility study done on the oldest portion of the jail, and I believe it is the oldest structure left on the sheriff's office campus. So there's a little bit of a debate here with that. So the Ball Street Jail was built in 1958. Some think that that structure that we're talking about for this feasibility study was built then. Others think it was an addition that was done in 1970. Either way, it's still very old, right, for a building structure that hasn't been touched since. So since that time, we've obviously outgrown the locker room facilities, the jail administrative entrance facilities. There's a lack of conference space. The briefing room was built for 15 to 20 staff members, where we now might have 40 on a shift. So those are all things being evaluated with that. But outside of that admin entrance section, that also encompasses the loading dock, our laundry facilities, our medical facilities. All of these facilities are also part of that original structure, and they're just kind of antiquated at this point in time. Obviously, there's been developments in both technology, increases in staff, and all those things that play into why having that study was done, why that study was necessary. I've kind of already spoke to that last one, so I'm going to move ahead. All right, so another performance measure here. Maintaining a sanitation score of 8 or above. So you can see in the graph here that we've stayed pretty steady with this one. I've pulled the first quarter of 2023. That's hovering at 8 right now too. This one doesn't tend to change a whole lot over time, which means we're doing a good job at that. But the sheriff spoke to the broken window effect in the law enforcement presentation, and the same applies in the correctional facility. Basically, if you don't address the small problems, they become big problems, right? So we have a lot of initiatives going on right now with all the construction going on in the facility to make sure that the cleanliness of the facility is a priority. And you can see from the graphs here that we continue to be successful at that. The next performance measure here is mitigating the number of use of force incidents generated when jail staff assist arresting agencies with uncooperative or new arrestees. So basically, an arresting agency will do what we call a call ahead to the jail to give them some sort of warning that they have an uncooperative inmate coming in. So that might be somebody that fought with the police prior to coming in. That might be somebody who's actively trying to kick out a window, or have some sort of issue going on. So the jail gets about 80 to 100 of these call-aheads a year. And what these graphs say is that 99% of the time, the correction staff are able to go out and de-escalate that situation to get that inmate into the building without any use of force being used. So we stay consistent with that pretty much over time too. The first quarter of 2023 is also sitting the same. Significant accomplishments, I've kind of talked about these throughout, but this first bullet, I didn't really give you numbers on. So 66 new corrections deputies were hired since 2021, and they were trained by 44 field training officers. if you look at the jail's roster, we've got a couple of different rosters that make up different areas of service, if you will, within the corrections division. But the main roster, which is our necessary positions within the jail, working the floors, maintaining the inmates, these numbers are 40% of that roster. So our average years of service on our night shift right now is 2 years. So just to put it in terms of how quickly we're seeing turnover, how that actually affects what we're doing, we have our entire night shift with 2 years of experience. So it's security improvements of the jail. We talked quite a bit about that. I'm not going to touch on that anymore, but jail management system, the last thing I want to say on this as to why it's listed as a significant accomplishment is that we had a vendor prior to the one we have now that we spent 4 or 5 years with that was unable to produce a product. We then transitioned to the vendor we have now, where we spent another 2 years developing what we recently implemented. So switching to a new jail management system, it takes a ton of work. We interface with a number of entities, other agencies. It's not a standalone system. It takes partnerships with a lot of people to accomplish that jail management system getting up and running. So 7 years in the making, it definitely feels like a huge accomplishment to finally have that moving ahead. And then lastly, the critical thinking and de-escalation. The last thing I wanted to touch on this was every corrections officer went through 8 hours of de-escalation training last year. And moving ahead, they will continue to receive de-escalation training that will continue to build those skills, but will also move forward with them and what skill set they are currently working at. So it's imperative that we continue to train our staff to be put in those situations in order to improve those outcomes. And I'm looking at Linda right now because that ultimately means less litigation. So I think that is it. And that's it for me. So if you guys have any questions, I'll take them.
All right, commissioners. Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Burrow. So I picked up one point that jumped out at me that I've never heard in a report before. You had stated we've had 3 assaults on staff so far in 2023. What is the ramifications for the inmate after an assault has been occurred? What's the process after the incident?
So after the incident, they would be moved to a segregation area where they would spend up to 15 days in segregation. They also get referrals to our medical department. They get referrals to our mental health department, and those are necessary for anybody getting moved into our disciplinary unit. Obviously, there's actions on the side of the deputy that would be taken to, so any form of assault, they would automatically be sent to medical for evaluation as well. And then from that, we have both a critical incident report that's done, and we have a use of force report that's done that plays into our use of force statistics.
And what level does it have to go for the courts to get involved?
And that's what the sheriff's saying right now behind me. Yeah, so they would go for criminal charges as well. So the investigative unit would become involved in that investigation. 3 is high in 6 months, yeah. Welcome.
All right, other comments or questions? Commissioner Pakla.
Sure. Thank you for that great presentation. I was pleased to hear the low number of use of force report that you had of those uncooperative inmates coming in. I was also really pleased to hear the professional development opportunities that you're providing to correctional staff. Wondering if you have any examples of the kinds of things that folks take advantage of. You know, certainly de-escalation training is one that you are engaging in a coherent effort around, but other examples of things?
So we actually have staff right now who are currently at the AJA conference, so the American Jail Association conference. We have 5 people there right now, so they range from supervisors to line staff. And they get opportunities for training. They get involved in presentations. They have the opportunity to become a presenter if they want to. They get to tour other facilities in order to see how they're providing services. And then they get to hear from professionals on best practices in the field.
That's great. Related to that question, I'm thinking about your high turnover, especially with the, the night shift, having all less than 2 years of experience. Wondering if, as folks are turning over, are you gaining any insight from them about things that they could have experienced? Obviously, the situation is very volatile at times and very high tension, very stressful, but are there other things that folks are mentioning that could be operational improvements that you all are taking into account?
Yeah, so I would say our shift assessment has been the biggest one. So we're competing not only with other jails, which really isn't what I consider competition at this point, but we're competing with other private sector businesses, right, who can make just as much money but work a Monday through Friday job, not have to come in and work holidays, not work those night shifts, not get forced over on mandatory overtime. Those are the things we're competing with right now. Law enforcement or corrections in general, you're working nights, weekends, holidays, don't always have a choice to go home to your family. Those are really the things we're competing with right now.
Great. Thank you so much for that information.
Just a reminder, commissioners, please turn on your mics before you speak. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One, I don't want to have any spoiler alerts for the opioid money request that you're going to make, but you said that you were hoping for an expansion of services. So we already do this in the jail, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And then there is a therapy component already that we're doing, and I'm just wondering who provides that, and do we have, I don't know, RNs or who is providing these services currently?
So right now we have 4 staff members that provide those MAT therapy services in the jail. They're employed by Network 180.
Okay.
So the expansion so currently they see around 50 inmates at a time. Ultimately, we think we would have the capacity for around 100 if we were to expand, with inmates that we know would be eligible for the program. Obviously, even 50 being treated by 4 people is a lot when you're talking about individual therapy or counseling sessions or education or any of the components that are involved in that service. So increasing not only the staff through Network 180, but also adding that medical component to it as well is also part of the proposal.
Okay, and so do we believe that we already have those 100 people there, if we could expand up to it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, great. And then I had a question as well about the external dashboards. What kind of information would you be sharing on an external dashboard where,
Yep,
your average citizen can look it up?
Yeah, so the dashboard that's on Access Ken is our population statistics, so we have the ability to grab that same information just from a different source, right? But some of the things that we're talking about implementing we have people that come into the correctional facility who are bonding somebody out. We have the ability to create a custom dashboard that would actually kind of give you an idea of the person who's bonding out, how much time they have left, where they're at in the book out process. So it's just efficiencies for the public to be able to see. Instead of maybe coming up to the window and asking, they can actually see where somebody's at in the process. So it's some of those sorts of things.
Okay, so it's more not so much a transparency in terms of how.
It could be
you
that
went to-
too.
It could be, okay.
It could be that too. I
Okay.
just don't think we've gotten that far on what the development of that's gonna look like.
Okay,
Yep.
well, it sounds very interesting.
Yep.
And then I wondered, and this probably will sound very strange, but do you do anything like customer satisfaction surveys for people in the jail? Only, I'm asking, do you get the temperature of how things are run? Because I'm assuming if people are more satisfied with that, then maybe they're easier to manage for the staff. Do you ever examine how things operate and say, hey, if we made changes that would make them happier, then we would be?
So I'm gonna ask you a clarifying question.
Yeah,
Are you
sure.
asking if we ask the staff this, inmates this, or the public?
I'm asking about inmates.
No, I don't think we've ever done that. I would say maybe our satisfaction rate is based off of our use of force or our incident rate. But no, we don't have a formal process for that right now.
I'm just, when we talked about, people being happy on the job,
Mm-hmm.
I thought if their job was easier because people were,
So even though the county doesn't do that, the Michigan Department of Corrections actually does come in and survey a number of inmates every year. That plays into the Department of Corrections inspections that we have to comply with. So they actually do something similar, but I don't know what the feedback of that is.
They don't give you anything?
They don't give us that
Oh,
feedback
that's too bad.
specifically.
Yeah,
but-
okay, sounds like that could be interesting
Yeah.
information. just curious about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hennessy.
You mentioned infrastructure needs, something that sounds as if it would go beyond the maintenance type things that we do through the capital improvement project. Infrastructure needs. Can you talk about the relationship between that and the millage that's available, the voted millage?
I'm going to let the sheriff field that one.
So in terms of the work that would need to be done, I mean, we have a part of that millage that comes into our operational budget. It helps to supply resources for staffing. And then there's part of the millage that is pulled in on a CIP project. That happens on a pretty regular basis. It'd be co-funded by CIP dollars that you allow for that year and the detention millage, but, you know, I can't really speak to how well it would meet the long-term needs of the correctional facility. I can say that it's a living building that has, you know, obviously the care and custody of individuals and therefore the safety of individuals at stake, and there will always be projects on the horizon. Lindsay mentioned just a couple key things, but obviously medical resources, medical services in general have changed for all of us, but particularly in the correctional setting. And trying to make sure that we have the appropriate facilities for that are really important to us. But even something as simple as a locker room, I mean, as you can imagine, when they built that, and I will clear that up, it's in the 50s that building was built. I wasn't here then, but close. When they built that, can you imagine how many female corrections officers we had working in a correctional facility? So there's some obvious needs of things that need to be changed in the facility, but there's always a project on the list. And then when there's not, there's going to be a renovation of jail cells because they deteriorate, the plumbing deteriorates, the facilities do. So it's something that's going to constantly be something we have to work towards. And the courts have changed dramatically, and that's part of this feasibility study too. The remote court sessions that we have to accommodate. It's not easy to do that in an old secured facility. I do want to say one more thing on the transparency. We publish our entire statistical analysis every year on the web, and it's got every piece of data point you could possibly imagine, everything that we've thought of, you know, the correlation between age and incarceration and where you were arrested, where you actually live, what kinds of charges you have, how did you get to jail and how did you get back out of jail. So it's a very, I would say, interesting read because I think it's very interesting. I'm not sure you'd want to read it from cover to cover, but if the community has an interest, there's a resource to find the information on the web, completely public.
All right. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Bujak.
Chair Burrow. Having had the opportunity to tour the facilities, I did want to compliment you on your ability to maintain a clean and sanitary operation. I think it's important for the inmates, but also very important for the employees that they have a clean and safe environment. And having, you know, had an inside view of what's going on there, I was really impressed at how well maintained that building is. And I think, for our responsibility as commissioners, we want to be able to provide the funding that you need to maintain that level of cleanliness, if you want to call it, because, you don't want health problems to be added to the mental health problems that are going there. So I think keeping the facilities very well maintained is important. And, it's something you don't report on, but I just want to let you know that having had that visual, I think, from what I can see, you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Diaz.
I had a question specifically on some of the stats that you shared. So if I remember correctly, you said that since 2018, the number of, at least compared to the current numbers or last year's numbers, the number of bookings has gone down significantly, but the length of stay has gone up. Is there a reason for that?
So when you get more serious assaultive charges coming into the jail, they tend to stay with us at a pretrial status longer. So we're not getting those short sentenced inmates with us anymore. We're getting those longer term inmates that sit with us through the court process.
And it's because those numbers, the numbers of assaults and that type of violent behavior has gone up?
Correct, yep.
Okay. My only other point, and it's probably more appropriate for a later time, but I did want to bring it up, and this is more so for the sheriff's department and the sheriff as a whole, is yesterday the governor signed the red flag law legislation, and I was just hoping that we could have I suppose, update from the sheriff's office, or not necessarily now, but in the future, as to around the implementation of those laws. I'm also planning on speaking to the prosecutor in the courts, specifically because there's been, since these laws have been implemented in other states, it has been shown through studies that it is very important for these laws to be implemented, to be enforced effectively, for them to be effective. So I was just hoping that we could have an update either now or in the future from.
Right, so there's, often with legislation such as this, there's a set of administrative rules that need to correspond, and there's still I can't speak this morning, administrative rule process that's going on, so we haven't seen the final version of how it will be implemented. There is some time between now and implementation that's probably gonna be into next year before implementation, but we'll follow it and obviously be prepared to do what we need to do as part of the sheriff's office. A couple components that, one, officer safety, because obviously these are highly dangerous types of encounters. So trying to manage and mitigate that risk to officers while we're still doing what we can to protect the community at large and also the person involved in the incident. So we'll get back with you on that once we have more information on that. And I also need to point out, between 18 and 22, there was a significant number of legislative changes that happened in 2020. It corresponded with the beginning of COVID, so we didn't even know what the pattern change was going to be in incarceration. But that really reduced the number of offenses that would bring somebody to be booked in jail, and then that group of people were largely the ones that were booked and then released within 24-hour time. So that's why you are seeing there is less likelihood of somebody being incarcerated until their offense gets pretty significant. And when their offense becomes significant, the consequences tend to be longer jail stays in a pretrial because they aren't necessarily as eligible for a release condition. And then also because they're, so it's obviously an average. So the time they would spend in our jail could also be that time waiting to go to prison. So a lot of factors play into that, but there are a lot of legislative changes behind it in 2020.
Thank you first, Sheriff, on the red flag notice. And so you're also saying that as far as the number of bookings, it's not necessarily an indication of the number of crime. Okay.
It is not in any way an indication of the number of crimes that we have in our community. As you've probably been aware, we have significant level of crime in the community that we're working very hard, but no, the two don't correlate.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other commissioners? All right, thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Sheriff. Really appreciate it. A couple of great presentations the last couple meetings. All right, our next item comes from the Administrator's Office. Al?
Yes. Okay, action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to approve the conversion of one part-time welcome plan coordinator position to a full-time position effective June 26, 2023. The Administrator's Office is requesting to convert the part-time welcome plan coordinator position to a full-time position. The change takes advantage of a state grant to continue Kent County Welcome Plan implementation and expand coordination with Kent County partner organizations that also serve residents of Ottawa County. The full-time role will be referred to as a Regional Welcome Plan Coordinator. The total cost of increasing the position to full-time through September 30 of this fiscal year is $30,016. An $81,327 Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity LEO Regional Community Collaborative Grant will fund the full-time position and contractual services to support the Welcome Plan implementation. Contractual services include translation and interpreter services for grant writing workshops, community outreach services, and meeting and training coordination for the Welcome Plan Collaborative. The Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity reported to Kent County that they will amend the Regional Community Collaborative contract in September 2023 to add funding through fiscal year 2024 for the full-time coordinator and Welcome Plan implementation activities. If funding is eliminated or decreased, the position will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to the fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations.
All right, Commissioners, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by LeGrand, support by Pakla. I believe that was. You kind of motioned a little bit. Just a little twitch. I kind of took that as a support. Commissioners, comments, questions? Commissioner Bujak.
Thank you, Chair Burrow. Just a quick question. What is the welcome plan?
Well, we have our Welcome Plan coordinator here with us today, and I think she would be delighted to talk about that. So.
Morning. My name is Holland Dela Cruz, Welcome Plan Coordinator for Kent County. The Kent County Welcome Plan is a community-led, community creative initiative that started with some grant funding through a national program called Gateways for Growth. This was back in 2018, 2019, that we received funding to do an economic impact report and then technical assistance to create a welcoming plan. So it was housed in Samaritas, but there's a steering committee that's made up of Samaritas, the Grand Rapids Chamber, the West Michigan Hispanic Chamber, the City of Grand Rapids, and Kent County. And so that was the driving committee moving this work forward. Since that time, the plan has moved from Samaritas and housed in Kent County as kind of a more broad region to cover. And it focuses on different priority areas to be more welcoming and inclusive and to empower immigrant and refugees who reside in Kent County.
And let me just add on to that. So when I first started in August of 2021, I think there was a little bit of organizing that needed to be done because they hadn't really landed on where things would. Initially, Grand Rapids was going to host the position or pay for a full-time position. And yet, when you look at it, Kentwood is maybe one of the most diverse communities anywhere. And there is a lot of diversity through other areas of Kent County. And so, and refugees settling throughout Kent County and West Michigan. And so, not just refugees, but new Americans, people that have gone through the immigration process. And so the big idea behind it is to help connect people to community, to opportunity, to jobs, and that type of thing. So Kent County did step up and take a lead role. That plan was actually in place before I started. We were able to fund Holland for the first year with money that was raised by the nonprofit community. The intention was to fund her half-time position when that money ran out. And so it's just kind of nobody expected, I guess, the state to step up and say, we'll fund the whole position. So that leaves us in a position of wanting to take advantage of the state funds. And then if at one point they would run out, we would want to do the half-time position at the county, maybe growing that over time into full-time, but also seek more support from our nonprofit community and even Grand Rapids.
Al, was that was the same position that the businesses, I mean, you said nonprofits, but was this the one that the local businesses also kind of chipped in some dollars?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad spectrum of who's involved in the Welcome Plan and the Welcome Plan Collaborative. So there's businesses, universities, public school system, municipalities, different city and county departments. And so the involvement from funders too has been, some of the bigger funders have been Fifth Third, Steelcase, Corwell.
Yeah,
Warner, Norcross, and Judd. So there's continues to be a funding development committee within the Welcome Plan Collaborative that's seeking funding through community. And sometimes that's businesses, sometimes that's, we recently received a grant from the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. So that work continues in tandem with this kind of expanded regional work.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I think if we're being asked to expand the position, we ought to know what it is that we're expanding. So, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Commissioner Pacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to make sure that I'm understanding the funding timing of all of this. So we have currently existing funds for halftime through external donations that have come in, right? I noted in your, Al, in your weekly summary last week that all we have contributed is the office space and infrastructure to support the position. But now we also have an external grant that's coming in the amount of $30,016 through September 30th, and we have effectively the promise from the state of Michigan to say they're going to continue that funding through next year, through 2024.
Yes, correct. We started with about 91,000 that we brought before the board that was held in trust by Samaritas, and then the Funding and Development Committee have been actively seeking funding from public and private Welcome Plan partners, and then the Regional Community Collaborative Grant for this short few months, and then have committed additional funding that we'll be submitting a new revised budget for in August, and they'll amend the contract pending board approval.
Okay, and I think what I'm getting at is I'm wanting to make sure that we are not putting a full-time position in a tricky spot to have sort of a cliff that's going to drop off at some point with funding. We have an anticipation through September 30th of 2024 that this will be funded, and that aligns pretty well with what the sort of action items are for the Welcome Plan.
Absolutely. When we looked at the work of the grant, a lot of the work are things that were already building the infrastructure to take place. And then we were intentional about establishing a funding and development committee so that, if the grant goes away, there's still this group that's working on getting community investment of dollars to support it so that we're not in that position.
Great, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also delighted the state stepped up with money, and I'm forgetting your acronym that you had, Al, but I really.
OPM, other people's money?
Other people's money. Other people's money. Don't ever say no to it, yeah. No, I appreciate it, and I think it makes so much sense. I was reading in The Bridge about population decline in the state of Michigan, and really helping new immigrants enfold into the community in a organized way, in a positive way, in a supportive way. I can see why the business community is so excited and supportive of this, and thank you, Teresa, for, having Holland come in and use your office. She's a perfect fit, I think, for yours, and thank you for your work, Holland. I think it's just really exciting and shows a lot of promise. So thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Chair Burrow. So my first question, so the Welcome Center Director reports to Teresa or to you, Al?
Teresa.
So my question has been kind of stated before too about going forward, if the grant ends, what happens? And it looks like there are community members that support the project and are already willing to kick money in support of that. I guess my question for you, Al, why did the group feel that county government was the first place or the best place to put this position instead of a group like the Grand Rapids Chamber or something like that?
I was not here when the committee started meeting. I know that Grand Rapids was kind of the first to step up and say they would do it. And the committee talked and thought the county would be a better fit. But Teresa, maybe you were there. Maybe you could answer that.
Yeah, a little bit of it might predate me, but I'll do my best. So a lot of the discussion, as Al mentioned, some of that was going back and forth on whether this should be housed in the city of Grand Rapids as a government, and then, as Al mentioned as well, recognizing that new Americans reside all throughout Kent County, granted heavily in the Kentwood community, but we can also say, there's immigrant refugees that have been here a long time all across the community. We have two chambers that are actually a part of the steering committee, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. So it was more thinking about how the county, through many initiatives, have served kind of as a neutral kind of convener in recognizing, yes, it could have been housed like anywhere, but thinking about, again, the broad focus that the county has, also recognizing some of the county departments that we have that serve, that like our health department, they're one of the first departments that oftentimes see refugees and immigrants coming into the community. So our steering committee felt that the county would have been best situated to house a position here, providing the infrastructure and support to make that happen versus a single chamber that's focused on business.
And then I'd also like Lori to
Yes.
address it,
Thank you,
because
Lori.
before Teresa was promoted
A lot of
as,
things predate.
before Teresa was promoted as Chief Inclusion Officer, Lori was kind of involved with that group from the very beginning, so.
Morning. A little bit of more context to what Teresa shared is that when the grant kind of funding ended and we developed the strategic plan, the next phase of the plan was the longevity of it. So the steering committee looked at what other models were in the country of other municipalities that have received this grant, what models did work. We did look at like the city of Dallas, where they did place it in a municipality, versus Baltimore, where they set it into a community organization. And we found that Dallas had more longevity, more stability, whereas the private organization, there were leadership changes, there were board changes, and there was a lot of challenges with that. So that was one factor that we looked at as to what other models were around the country that were proving successful. And as what Teresa and Al both talked about, is that there was a lot of feedback in a lot of the research that it not just be centralized about the city of Grand Rapids, because we do have new Americans throughout Kent County. So if you just put it with the Grand Rapids Chamber, the city of Grand Rapids, people felt like the focus would just be in the city limits and not that holistic county approach. So that's why we ended up having it placed here in Kent County.
Thank you, Lori. That institutional knowledge of the Baltimore, Dallas, I didn't know that. I mean, that was a great analogy. All right, any other comments, questions? If not, all those in favor say yes. Yes. All those opposed? It has been approved. All right, Commissioner Miscellaneous. Anybody have any miscellaneous? Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
I will note that Senior Millage Committee is meeting today and tomorrow and later to do our allocations for the fiscal year that will begin on October 1st.
Right.
This will be the first time we're running on the county's new fiscal year as opposed to a calendar year. So our meetings are beginning now.
All right, wonderful.
And will be lasting all day today and much of tomorrow.
Thank you, Commissioner Hennessy.
Several commissioners are taking part.
All right, any other Commissioner Miscellaneous? Seeing none, oh, Commissioner Diaz. I was going to try to get that in before you raise your hand.
One very quick one. I know it's been brought up in some of our other board meetings as a whole, but I would like us to start putting the bug in our ear to start having some thoughts into perhaps some things that we would like to take control over at a local level if some changes are made in Lansing as far as giving back some local control to local municipalities and county governments. I know, for example, Commissioner DeBoer brought up her hesitation as far as the state attempting to remove local control when it comes to mining. But I was thinking more so things like possibly rent control or a local minimum wage or something along those sorts if we are giving permission to do so by Lansing. So I just wanted to bring that up to our committee here and then hopefully have some of our colleagues start thinking about that for the future. Thank you.
All right. Any other Commissioner Miscellaneous? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.